In today's video, we're going to be painting up a Yeti Chieftain from Reaper Miniatures. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do, we're starting off with our Yeti Chieftain, is we're going to come in with some Citadel contrast paint with apothecary white. And we're going to be using this to cover all of the fur of our Yeti Chieftain here. Now just remember, before applying this paint here on the miniature, I have pre-cleaned it and primed the miniature in a matte white primer, so it gives a nice effect with the contrast paints because they require primer to go on there, and depending on the color of the primer changes the actual color of the contrast paint. So I've gone with just a plain neutral matte white here from Army Painter to give off a sort of slight blue grey appearance that the apothecary white seems to have on this. So it's quite a good colour for the Yeti skin, not Yeti skin, Yeti fur I should say, sorry. And we just want to apply this pretty liberally over all of the Yeti's fur, getting it all in the nooks and crannies of all the nice detail that's printed on here. Okay, so once our contrast paint is completely dry, what we're going to do now is we're going to come in with a matte white, which is the same colour that I just used to prime this miniature, and we're going to be dry brushing it on all the raised areas of the fur of our Yeti Chieftain here. And this is going to be basically just focusing on all the points where the light would naturally hit this miniature. So we'll want to go on top of the knees, the belly that he's got sticking out, on top of his big arm that he's holding up. Just everywhere that the light would naturally catch, to bring a lot of that strong white in there, since the sun's going to be shining down. It's going to really bring out all the whiteness of his fur. Okay, so once we're finished with the dry brushing, what we're going to do now is we're going to come in with some pale blue from Vallejo. I'm going to be using the pale blue to be painting all of our Yeti Chieftain's skin here. So we want to be going for his face just up here, his hands and his feet. We want to be giving a nice good coverage on there, and really trying to focus in on just getting the areas where there's some exposed skin. So you can see here that there's a reasonably clearly defined line between the fur of our Yeti and our exposed skin. So I'm trying as hard as I can to really avoid those areas. Now remember, we can always come back with our original color here, or the matte white that we've got, and then apply our original contrast paint here to get that smooth transition if we need to. But for now, I'm doing okay at avoiding those different areas, so it's not too much of a problem. So once we have all the Yeti skin painted up, what we're going to be doing now is we're going to come in with some Vallejo black, and we're going to be using the Vallejo black to be just painting on the inside of our Yeti Chieftain's mouth here, because we want it so it's going to have this nice depth of the model, so you can really see down his screaming mouth that we've got on here. So just coming in with a small brush if you need to, a finer brush than what we have been using if you think it's a bit hard to get in there. But for me, just putting a big blob of paint basically on the end of my brush and just sticking it down there and moving it around to get as much coverage as I possibly can. And as well as that, we also want to use our Vallejo black to be painting up all the claws on our Yeti Chieftain miniature here, so all on the toes, and don't forget about the hands as well. So once we have the claws and the inside of the mouth painted up, we're going to come in now with some warlock purple, and we're going to be using the warlock purple to be painting up our Yeti Chieftain's tongue. So we just want to get down in here and as carefully as we can get on that area without covering too much over the black, but luckily the black is such a strong color that we can just come in with a wet brush and clean up most of the warlock purple that we're placing on here. Now this probably will take a couple of coats, especially if we've gotten a lot of that black all around the place, so don't forget about that. Okay, so once the tongue is dried and we've got enough layers on there that we're happy with it, we're going to come in with some mummy robes, and we're going to be using mummy robes to be painting up our chieftain's teeth. So just getting the bit of paint on the tip of your brush and just picking out all the little teeth that he has on him. There's quite a lot of good, nice protruding teeth detail on here, so it's going to be nice and easy to pick out with your brush. So once we have all the teeth painted up, we're going to come back in again with mummy robes, and we're going to be doing another one of those tricky details, which is painting the eyes. So what we're going to do first is my technique of just doing it the simplest way I can figure out how to do eyes, which is grab our colour of our eye, so the white of our eyes, which is the mummy robes, placing it on the area of the eye sockets, going over a lot of the area that we have for the eye socket, so we've got a lot of room to play around with, and we just want to get as wide an area as we can so we can really focus on those eyes. So don't worry about it too much, because we can always come back and tidy it up when we need to. So once we have the area all ready for we need to for the eyes, what we're going to be doing is we're going to come in with some vallejo black again that we used on our claws and in our mouth, and we're just going to be picking out the eyes. Now this is always going to be a tricky detail, and I can never generally get it right the first time, but I've come in here with a very fine brush, and I'm just dabbing on an area with just a tiny amount of paint to just give off the part of the eye. And you can see here on this one, it's quite hard to see how I'm doing the other eye. I'm trying the best I can to get it in the shot, but I hope you get the idea. And if it's too big or too small, you can always spend your time adjusting it to where you need it so you can get it the way you want looking. It is going to take a few tries, so don't worry about that. So now we have our eyes painted how we want them, or as close as we can. We're going to come into now with leather brown, and our Yeti Chieftain actually has a leather strap where he's holding on to this giant sort of saber-tooth skull that he's got on here, so we want to make sure we get that. So just coming on with the leather brown and picking out all the areas that have our leather strap on here, and just being careful to avoid a lot of the area where all that fur is. You can see here that I'm just picking out the areas where you can just see that detail. So just take your time and pick out where you need to with this. Okay, so now what we're going to be doing is we're going to move on now with some skeleton bone, and we're going to be painting up the skull that we have here on our Yeti Chieftain, which I'm guessing by the shape and the design of it, it's a saber-tooth tiger he's taken down. So we want to make sure we get that skull on there. So skeleton bone is, of course, a nice obvious choice for doing bone detail, and we just want to give it a nice base coat covering the whole thing. And don't forget about to really get in there in those eye sockets and stuff as well, because there is quite a deep hole in there, so we want to try cover as much as we can of that skull. Okay, so once we have that skull all painted up, we're going to come back again with mummy robes, using a lot of this colour here today, and we're going to be just picking out the tooth, the big long fang teeth of our skull on here to really differentiate them and to show off that they're teeth and it's not all just one big bone, since aged teeth and bone have a slightly different colour, and the way we're going to differentiate that was with these two colours here. Okay, so now we have that complete. What we're going to be doing now is we're going to be coming in with some blue ink, and as well as that we're going to be using some lahmian medium from Citadel, which is a medium gel for placing on inks and paints and stuff to thin them down nicely. Now you can use water, but I had some of this, which gives off a better effect than water, because water can sometimes separate, especially in paints, when thinning them down. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be thinning these down to a very light consistency. It'll probably vary depending on you, but it's roughly half ink to half lahmian medium. But whatever you feel necessary, since this tone is so dark, and I just want it to pop out a little bit of highlights without being as dark as it is in the pot. So just doing that, and then once we do that, we want to give a nice wash over all the areas that we painted in pale blue, so all the skin of the Yeti. So once we have all the skin all nice and washed, we're going to come in now with some seraphim sepia, and we're going to be using that to place a wash over our saber-tooth tiger skull that he has on him here. So giving off a nice real good sort of bone color here, and this really ages it up quite quickly. So this is a nice effect to go on here. So don't forget to give that a good area and really put some into the eyes and stuff so we can make those pop out as well. Okay, so now what we're going to be doing is we're going to be giving a similar thing to what we did before, except for we're going to be using nuln oil. So we're going to be using our nuln oil, and we're going to be just diluting it down with our lahmian medium here. So it's not so strong, especially since we're using nuln oil, which is a black wash. It's going to really dull all that color down and really stain all that white and off-white that we've used for our Yeti fur. So that's why I've dulled it down with the lahmian medium to make it come out as more of a light gray. And you can also come back over if you need to, if you find it's a little bit too dark, with our matte white, and just dry brush over it again to bring back all those whites that we had before. And it's going to look really good in the shadows as well. Okay, so with all that done, we're going to move on to some basing. So all I've done is I've just placed some PVA glue here, and what I'm going to be doing is getting some snow flock from Army Painter here, and we're just going to dunk it into the big pot that we've got of it, and it's going to give off that real awesome snow effect, since I want this Yeti to be at the top of a mountain, screaming a war cry. So that's what I'm sort of going for here, and this snow effect gives off a really good look to that. And I'm also going to be using some Army Painter tufts here, but remember, the basing's all up to you and what you want to do. And with that, we have finished painting up our Yeti Chieftain from Reaper Miniatures. You can see it was quite an easy paint job, but with just those few colours and adding in some extra details like the basing, we can really bring out this miniature's full awesomeness with it yelling from the top of the mountain here. So I hope you've enjoyed this video, whether you want to paint along with me or you just enjoy watching me paint up some cool miniatures. I'd like to thank you all for watching. And also, this is going to be my last video for the year, so I will see you guys all next year with some new miniatures to paint, as well as some cool new miniature companies that I haven't used yet to paint up. So I'd like to thank you all for that, guys. I hope you guys have a happy holiday as well, and I'll see you next year.